It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk about what types of innovation are needed for HNV farming. So this is from Work Package 2 from the HNV-Link project, which was coordinated by EFNCP. Most of the work was done by other partners. In Work Package 2, we aim to identify the types of innovation that improve the viability of HNV farming while keeping the nature value. So innovation that is working for HNV farming currently. And we also looked at the innovations that are needed but not yet implemented on a significant scale, which we called innovation gaps. So we worked with these 4 themes. We've heard about these from previous speakers, so I won't describe them in any detail. Just to say that we're not looking at innovation in 4 separate boxes. We recognize that there's interplay and overlap between these 4 themes, but it's just a way of focusing our work. So we produced 3 main outputs, a database of 143 innovation examples, the compendium report, which you can see online, which tells the LA the 10 learning area innovation stories and the analysis of gaps, and the interactive map, which Arina will explain, I think, in the next presentation, which is the place to go on the website if you want to see the actual innovation examples. So the examples are presented on a standard fiche format. It's a 4-page fiche, which looks at the problem addressed by the innovation, the story in a nutshell, what is achieved for HNV farming, the process that made the innovation happen, critical factors for success, and the limiting factors. So problems and limiting factors causing problems. So just to look very quickly at a few examples and tease out a few key messages. Some of the examples are individual farmers. So like this one in Spain, he's a very innovative farmer. He's highly motivated. He's very dynamic. He's going against the mainstream trend towards intensification. He's doing sustainable extensification. And he's also processing and marketing his own products. So it's a fantastic example, but it's just one farm. And unfortunately, his neighbors are not copying his lead. They're not following his lead. So the question is, how do we get whole communities of HNV farmers to innovate so that we have a result at a landscape scale? And we have examples of this, many examples of this in the project. And the answer to the question is how to make, the question of how to make it happen at a community landscape scale is somebody has to make it happen. So there needs to be facilitation or animation, as Sergio called it earlier. And this is also, of course, the process that James was describing in the Burren. Facilitation is about people going out and talking to farmers, encouraging farmers, helping them find solutions, acting as a bridge between HNV farmers and the administration, looking for funding. It's a whole process of facilitation and animation. And in many of the examples that we found, it was NGOs that were playing this function. So in the Bulgarian case here on the slide, it was a bird conservation NGO. In the Croatian example, it's the local action group and Slow Food. In some cases, it might be a university department. But what's generally not the case is that the conventional advisory extension services don't play this function. It's much more demanding and complicated than just advising farmers. So it's all about facilitation. So every HNV area needs some sort of local facilitation project of that sort, like the locally led schemes that we heard about in Ireland. We have technical innovations for processing and marketing, but these need to be accompanied by innovation in the regulatory framework for food processing and food marketing. Otherwise, producers don't feel encouraged to try innovative things, like a cheese dairy in a caravan in a Natura 2000 site, if they have no confidence that the authorities will permit it. Regulatory innovations are needed in many different areas. Animal health, things like campaigns to eradicate tuberculosis in livestock, often take little account of the realities of extensive systems on common pastures. Agri-environment schemes that are designed with input from HNV farmers and from conservation experts that are tailored to the needs of HNV farming. Again, all HNV farming areas need agri-environment schemes like this that are ambitious on a landscape scale like the ones in Romania. So a lot of this comes down to social and institutional dialogue and collaboration at different levels. And we have specific examples of this in the project, like these two on the slide, the Pacte Pastoral Intercommunal in France, or a much more local process in Sweden for working with landowners and local actors. But at the end of the day, all of these innovations that we're talking about have some kind of social, institutional dialogue and collaboration process behind them. That's the crucial thing. So moving on to the analysis of gaps, each learning area, the team from the project made an assessment of to what extent existing HNV innovation is addressing the scale of the challenges. So a measurement of to what extent the innovation is responding to the needs. So on this matrix, number one is very few innovations, and only affecting HNV farming on a very small scale. Number four is a good situation with many innovations functioning on a large scale. There isn't a very clear pattern in terms of the gaps. In a thematic sense, there are gaps across all themes. It depends on which learning area you look at. But just to point out that the most common number on this chart is the number one, so a very unsatisfactory situation. And the number four, a satisfactory situation, only appears 4 times out of 40. So just to confirm that in all learning areas that we looked at, there are still important gaps that need to be addressed. In the compendium report, you can find much more information about the specific gaps that we identified and how they could be addressed by cross-fertilizing examples from one learning area to another. So that's all in the compendium report. So finally, some findings, some conclusions. Good examples of HNV innovation exist in all regions that we looked at, but the learning areas are at very different stages. So an innovation in one place, something that's innovative in one area, maybe it's been happening for 20 years in a different area. Some learning areas are suffering from rigid institutional structures and non-innovative policies. That includes agricultural but also environmental policies. And this situation prevents support from going to HNV farming, from rewarding the public goods of HNV farming, and it blocks innovation on the ground by farmers and producers. Local HNV projects are vital for sustaining HNV farming on a significant landscape scale. So this means motivated HNV facilitators working with farmers, with HNV farmers, and with institutions. And that's very different from conventional advisory services. It's a different function. All this takes time to make it happen, and it requires time and continuity, both of the projects themselves and of the institutional engagement and support. And last findings, nowhere is innovation happening on a sufficient scale to respond to the challenges faced by HNV farming. But for all the gaps we identified, relevant solutions do exist in other locations. So we don't need to invent new innovation, we just need to spread the existing innovation approaches more widely across HNV farming areas. And for this to happen, we do need a favourable policy framework at the EU and at the member state levels. And it would help a lot if member states were required to have HNV farming as part of their strategic plans. And I think it's clear, whatever the explanations for HNV farming being taken out of the new CAP proposals, the fact that it's been taken out is a green light to member states to say, okay, we can forget about HNV farming, it's no longer a priority at the European level. And finally, I resurrected the old HNV triangle, so a bit of retro innovation, but with some new words. So we're trying to achieve a situation where HNV farmers and producers are supported and are enabled to innovate. And for that, we need a policy and regulatory framework which is adapted to HNV farming needs and which rewards the public goods of HNV farming. And we need institutional integration, joined up working, dialogue, and above all, facilitation. Thank you.